If you've been feeling out of practice when it comes to watercolors, today we're going to dive back in with this simple sketchbook practice. Hey friends, welcome back. My name is Shayda Campbell, and around here we make art and it's fun, not scary. In today's watercolor warm-up, we're gonna focus on brushwork and color mixing, all with the goal of painting these beautiful, cheerful autumn leaves. So grab some watercolor paper, your favorite set of paints, a couple paintbrushes, and let's get started. These are some recent YouTube videos that I've done in this sketchbook. If you haven't seen them, go watch them because they're great seasonal videos all about painting autumn landscapes, farmers market doodles, all the good stuff. Anyways, let's talk mixing colors because that's what we're going to begin with for these gorgeous leaves. Now, if you want all my supplies, just watch until the end of the video and I'll go over all of it. First up, a beautiful red. I like to mix magenta, the one in this set is called Rose Madder Hue, with a bit of burnt umber, and that gives me a really nice natural red. Then for a sort of yellowy brown, I'll mix Naples yellow with a little bit of burnt umber again, and that's a great fall color. I'll take a little bit of light red, which is down in the corner here, and I'll mix that with a little bit of that Naples yellow. We could also do a more buttery yellow, so maybe a bit of cadmium yellow or Naples yellow with white, maybe add a hint of brown in there, and then just burnt umber on its own is going to give you a nice natural brown. And you don't have to follow my mixes exactly. The key is start with a few different colors and then play and change the mixes as you go. Mix in a little more brown or a little more red and see how they look on the paper. Now for my first fall leaf, you can see I kind of do a guide. I start with a line and then I put those little lines going out to the left and right. And then what I'll do is just do a large brush mark, add pressure to the brush and kind of make a large oval shaped mark, and they all join together to create a leaf shape. And then you can always redo the lines while the paint is wet to give you some light, veining lines there. And as you can see, I've used yellow and then a bit of brown, and they mix together really beautifully. So as you paint these leaves, do not think about trying to paint any certain leaf shape. Just think about brushwork, adding a natural pressure to your brush when it hits the page, and color mixing. For the next leaf, we'll start with a guide again, 3 lines, and then add that pressure to the brush and make kind of an oval shape over each line. I need to pick up more paint. So there I have my 3 oval shapes. They all join together, and then I'm using the tip of the brush to kind of muss them up and make the ends of each oval a little more pointy. And then we'll do 2 more little bits down at the bottom and give it a stem, and you've got this very whimsical, very perfectly imperfect maple leaf, kind of like a maple leaf. The nice thing here is that we're just focused on adding pressure to that brush, sweeping the brush across the paper in a natural motion so that you get this nice natural leaf shape. Let's pick up some of that buttery yellow and come over here, and we're just going to do 3 leaves by adding a bit of pressure to the brush. So sweep that brush across the page, do a cluster of leaves, and then use the tip of your round brush to join them together with some thin, delicate stems. I'm using a number 8 round brush for most of these leaves, and it's really good for that. It can do large areas of color, but also delicate bits. And then I lifted a little color just using paper towel. You can also use a cotton ball or cotton swab. And then I went in with a bit of green. This is just sap green mixed with a little bit of burnt umber. So it's like that really warm autumny green. And you can just see me adding a little bit of color into the wet area. And the nice thing about wet into wet or wet on wet, that's adding wet paint on top of wet paint, is that the color will bleed and blend in a really natural way. So the paint is kind of doing the work for you, and you're getting these really organic, natural looking colorations to the autumn leaves. And then I just added some more stems and leaves just using the green. And then I came back in and put a little more yellow into the green. So you could kind of go either way. I just wanted to see which one I liked better. And I actually preferred starting with the green and then adding a little bit of yellow to my green. Before we get to the next few leaves, I want to share something that's been inspiring me lately. So you know how scents can take you back to a moment, like the smell of rain or your favorite aunt's perfume? Fragrance kind of feels like this invisible little art form. It shapes your mood, your memories, and even your confidence. That's why I'm so excited to partner with ScentBird this month. Thank you to ScentBird for sponsoring today's video. ScentBird is a fragrance subscription that makes it easy to explore. Each month, you get these gorgeous little vials, sleek and portable, but they actually hold a 30-day supply. The case twists to spray, and you can even pop the little vial out to see how generous the volume is. There's more than you'd expect. I love that they're small enough to slip into a pocket or bag or even a pencil case. This month I tried out 4 fragrances, each with their own personality. The first is Moonwake Tuberose by Nomad Nome. It's creamy and floral with tuberose, absolute, cardamom, and bergamot right at the front. I also tried Moon Glory by The Harmonist. This one feels very graceful and poetic. It's all about flowers at dusk, Hawaiian jasmine, Queen of the Night, passion flower. And finally, I tried Skin Reserve Blend by Clean Reserve. This one is like a warm hug in fragrance form. Soft and cozy, creamy Madagascar, vanilla, and musk. It sits close to the skin, so it's subtle and comforting. I love that each of these scents has its own story, and with ScentBird, you don't have to commit to a huge bottle. Did you know that wearing the same fragrance every day can lead to nose blindness, where you stop noticing your own scent? That's why ScentBird keeps things fresh with a new fragrance every month. So if you'd like to try it out, use the QR code on the screen or click the link below. With my code, you'll get 55% off your first month. That's only $9, plus free delivery and even a free case. Thanks again to ScentBird for sponsoring today's video. The next 2 leaves we'll do are similar, they just vary slightly in their size. So I have a good amount of that orangey color in my round brush, and I start by doing the delicate stem, and then I just add a bit of pressure, and I pull the brush towards me once, twice, and that's how I create the leaf shape. And I'm going to take a slightly lighter orange, so I just mixed in some more water, more Naples yellow, and 1 or 2 pulls. That gives you your leaf shape, and then you just use the tip of your round brush to help refine the leaf, so maybe give it a bit more of a fine point. And then you can do some that are a little smaller. I like how some are a bit lighter. They don't all have to connect to that initial stem. And then we're going to rinse our brush, and I've just picked up a bit of the burnt umber. So just burnt umber, nothing else mixed in, and we are doing the same leaf but just smaller. You're just going to sort of flick that brush, do 1 or 2 little pulls of the brush. You know, you should be able to make this little leaf shape in 1 or 2 pulling motions of that round brush. This style of leaf makes for an excellent brushwork practice. You'll practice pressure and refining the shape, and it's also really satisfying to create those leaves. Okay, next we're going to do a little fern. So you can see I've started with a long stem, and then I'm just using the tip of my brush to do little branches going off to the left and right, and then I put little clusters of leaves along each of those branches. Basically, I'm making a leaf shape, but I'm doing it one little oval shape at a time, but they'll come together to create a long leaf. So start with the line and then put little pairs of oval shaped brush marks, and you can see how they form a sort of long fern-like leaf. And then we just keep going down, and those leaves can get a little bit longer. You might do 3 pairs of leaves or 4 as opposed to 2 at the top, and there's your fern. Next up, I want to do a singular leaf. So I'm starting with a nice light watery yellow, so it's going to be very transparent, which just means I mix lots of water in. And then I'm running that brush around in a circular motion, just creating a very perfectly imperfect leaf shape that comes to a bit of a point. And then you can see me kind of flicking the sides of that shape out. So moving my brush along the side of the leaf, creating some teeth along the edge. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of a watery burnt umber or Naples yellow, and we're just going to release a little color into the shape. And again, because we're doing wet on wet, it gives a really natural coloration. Okay, I'm going to do 1 more of those guys. So with a nice watery orange, I'm going to make the shape sort of a oval that comes to a point. And then you can see me just using the tip of my round brush to add all these little teeth along the edge. And you want to do that while it's still nice and wet. And then I'll actually take a little paper towel and lift some of that color, just so that later on I can add more interest either with colored pencil or more paint. I'm going to use that same kind of formula, but switch it up a bit. So I'm doing the cluster of leaves. We did the green and yellow one, where I join them with those thin stems. But then I'm just using the tip of my brush to do little flicks and kind of create leaf shapes that are a bit more interesting. So they look a little bit more toothy. I could lift a little color there with a dry brush, but yeah, simple. The idea here is we're just working on our brushwork, we're working on color mixing, and we're just making messy shapes. And as I've said many times on this channel, it's a leaf if you say it's a leaf. You can just put a messy brush mark down, and then later on you could add some little veining lines and just say, hey, that's a leaf. So have fun with these and don't overthink it. We're practicing brushwork and color mixing. And now what I want to do is start adding detail to our messy brush marks that we are calling leaves. So I'm going to grab my colored pencils, but we're also going to use some more watercolor for this. For those of you that don't want to use colored pencils or don't have them, you can continue the detail portion of this with watercolor paint. So this is called wet on dry, and it's just what it sounds like. We're going to use wet paint over dry paint, and that allows us to be really precise. So we're not going to get any of that bleeding and blending. We'll take a little dark brown just on the very tip of the brush and do some little veining lines on these tiny leaves. And then we'll come up here and we'll do a line right down the center of this guy with just a little bit of color on the tip of my round brush. And you can switch to a smaller brush if you're more comfortable. You can create such detail. And you can see I'm just doing these lines, thin lines angled in toward that center stem. And they don't have to be perfect. I like that they kind of go off the leaf a little bit. It's messy and silly. And then I brought in a darker Naples yellow and I just did a few messy brush marks to sort of muss up those veining lines and make sure they don't look too perfect. But I also wanted to create a bit more contrast on this leaf since it looked quite light. So that's the beauty of watercolor. You can play around with strong detail like the lines, but also some more messy detail like adding more color on top. You could also do a little outline on some of your leaves. I think making an outline that doesn't quite match up perfectly with the color is always a good whimsical choice. And we can add more color. So this orange leaf where I had lifted some of the orange, now I can come in with a bit of yellow and add some more color there. But I actually think I'd like to switch to colored pencils at this point. So I'm just going to grab my pencil sharpener, and I've got lots of, burgundies and dark oranges and browns, and we'll start doing some of the detail with colored pencil, especially if those veining lines that we did on that leaf at the top of the page looked like, wow, that's really detailed for me to do with a paintbrush. Then grab a brush pen, like a Tombow brush pen or a colored pencil, and do the lines that way. Mixed media is not cheating. I think, in fact, it's a really pretty way to do things, and you have all the control of a colored pencil. So here we'll do that same leaf, the line down the center, and it doesn't have to be a straight line, and then all these little angled lines coming towards center gives it a really pretty look. And then since I kind of liked the extra color that I got with the paint, I thought, why don't I add a little shading with orange, with a couple different oranges, and see if I can kind of get that same effect that I got with the paint with the colored pencils. And I actually like the way that looks with the two oranges blended together, sort of with the veining lines. I'm really just playing and experimenting from here on out, so feel free to follow exactly what I'm doing or try something totally different. Like for this yellow oak-like leaf, I am doing an outline. I still did the center line, but then I did a messy outline that doesn't quite line up with the color, and then I will add those little angled lines coming in from the left and the right, and they're very messy and silly, and I'm doing that in a dark brown, but you could have chosen a dark orange or even a dark yellow or a light brown or red. Okay, you get it. And then I'm going to try to do a little shading, so using a very light brown as well as muted orange, and I think that's looking kind of cool. So just having a bit of fun trying out some different colored pencils. And then I'm going to come in with the dark brown and thicken up some of the outline areas. I just think that looks kind of cool. Up here, I will use a warm green to do messy lines down the center of each leaf. And I might even draw in an extra leaf here because I've kind of got some space in the center of my page. And then we could do a few little lines off to the left and right. Just make everything very messy. Nothing is straight. Everything's a little wonky and very perfectly imperfect. Whether you do this second step with colored pencil, brush pen, marker, or more paint, the second step is really what's so important. The first thing that we do is mix up some fall colors, and then we just put them on the page. Messy brush marks. Sure, you can try to paint an oak leaf or a maple leaf, but really we just want some messy shapes on the paper. And I think playing around with color mixing, with how much pressure you add to your brush, that's really the key. And then when you add all these little lines and outlines and stuff, that's when you can really see the leaves coming to life. And so don't be afraid to add a bit of colored pencil or marker, or if you're working on your detail skills with the brush, then this is a great practice to, grab a smaller paintbrush and do those little detail lines and outlines. But that's when these leaves are really going to sing. I'm loving creating autumn content, friends. You know this, it's my favorite season. And this weekend, there is a bonus video over on Patreon. So head over there and get access to the bonus video. It's just $3 a month to join my Patreon, or $33 for the entire year. And right now it is on sale. So head to Patreon. If you've been thinking about joining, it's a great time to sign up. Thank you so much for watching today, friends, and potentially for painting along. This is a great way to get those watercolor muscles back in shape. Painting leaves is something I go back to again and again. Let me give you a quick supply rundown. I used a number 8 round brush, but I also recommend a number 8 filbert for practicing. And then I used my little Shayda Campbell watercolor set. This is from Daler Rowney, and it has my name on it, but most importantly, it has all the colors chosen by me. So lots of beautiful magentas and browns. And then we had 2 glasses of clean water, paper towel for blotting our brush, and my favorite colored pencils from Faber-Castell and Lyra. Everything is linked in the video description.